The gavel cracked like a bone, and the courtroom forgot how to breathe. Maya Hale said, "That wasn't justice," and her fingers found the sealed letter in her coat. Evan Cross said, "Breathe with me," his voice soft enough to pass for safety. Noah Briggs said, "Order will be maintained," yet his jaw worked like a grinding gear. Vivian Mercer watched as if the verdict were a painting she already owned. Maya mapped exits, counting heartbeats against the echo that would not stop. Evan's hand hovered near her shoulder, offering warmth that felt like a rope. Vivian said, "Closure is a kind of mercy," and the word tasted metallic in the air. The judge spoke, but the room listened to old ghosts instead. Maya remembered Jonah's humming and the way silence fell after it. A phone vibrated somewhere, a tiny alarm that failed to save anyone. Maya said, "This isn't over," and the echo finally learned her name. The hallway smelled like wet wool and second chances no one could afford. Evan Cross said, "They will spin this until it shines," and the words slid like oil on stone. Maya Hale said, "Truth doesn't polish," and felt the letter burn her pocket. Noah Briggs said, "You should both go home," while his eyes counted cameras. Vivian Mercer appeared without footsteps, a storm tucked beneath perfect posture. Vivian said, "Let me arrange a statement," as if grief could be catered. Maya traced exit signs and noted the failing bulb by the stairwell. Evan said, "I can talk to the clerk," and his comfort coiled around the moment. A teenager watched from the far bench, sketching faces like crimes. Maya said, "Who are you?" But the girl was already gone. The hallway swallowed the question and kept its hunger. Midnight folded the city into a single ringing phone. Maya Hale said, "Say your name," to the dark kitchen as rain clicked on the sill. Lena Park said, "You don't know me," and the voice held matches and milk. Evan Cross left 3 unread messages, each softer than the last. Noah Briggs said, "We will review procedures," through a voicemail that sounded like a lock. Vivian Mercer said, "We can fix perception," and the promise wore velvet gloves. Lena said, Jonah Reed was with her the night before he vanished, and silence broke. Maya opened the letter a fraction, then sealed it again with breath. Lena said, "Meet me where the river keeps secrets," and the line died clean. Maya mapped the route twice, and checked the window latch twice more. The river lot smelled like rust and cold sugar from a distant bakery. Maya Hale said, "You chose this place," with her back to the wall. Lena Park said, "Secrets float here until they sink," and kicked a bottle cap. "Ah!" Evan Cross said, "I should have come," in a text that blinked like a heartbeat. Noah Briggs idled at the far curb, windows fogged, patience weaponized. Vivian Mercer said, "You are in danger of becoming interesting," in a message with no sender ID. Lena said, "I keep what people throw away," and produced a cracked phone. Maya saw Jonah's grin in a thumbnail and the ground moved. Lena said he was with Vivian the night before, and the wind shoved the truth forward. Maya said, "Show me everything," and the river accepted the bargain. The video stuttered like a guilty heartbeat, and then sharpened. Maya Hale said, "Pause there," as Lena's thumb hovered over the cracked glass. Vivian Mercer laughed in the frame, and the sound was money counting. Evan Cross said, "This could be misdated," after Maya sent a clip without asking. Noah Briggs said, "You obtained this how?" and the text felt like a badge pressed to skin. Lena Park said, "People lose more than phones when they drink," and her eyes dared belief. Maya said, "Jonah hums when he is nervous," and the clip hummed. Vivian touched Jonah's sleeve, and the world voted again. Evan said, "Let me handle the chain of custody," and the net closed without knots. Maya said, "No more handling," and the night leaned closer to listen. Morning found the shelter lobby smelling of coffee and bleach, and resolve thinner than steam. Maya Hale said, "If I sit still, the echo catches me," and her gaze fixed on the fire exit map. Evan Cross said, "Then we will move gently," and matched his breath to hers. A bulletin board trembled when the HVAC kicked on, as if rumors had weight. Maya traced routes with a fingertip and counted heartbeats like stations. Evan said the clip matters, but you matter more, and the room steadied a notch. The receptionist watched privacy form around them, a curtain sewn from care. Maya said, someone wanted that verdict. And it wasn't the truth, and the air cooled. Evan said, we will keep the evidence clean, and kindness arrived with an invoice. A group meeting laughed down the hall, bright as mismatched silverware. Maya said, Jonah would have hated the noise, and she almost smiled. The door opened to rain that promised to rinse nothing away. The cafe poured warmth like a promise and charged interest in whispers. Evan Cross said, you need a statement that holds, and stirred a cup he would not drink. Maya Hale said, I need truth that holds, and watched streetlight reflections fight puddles. The barista called names that were not theirs, and safety felt borrowed. Evan said, we can direct attention toward the chain of custody, and the words wore silk. Maya said, Vivian touched Jonah's sleeve, and the sugar caddy rattled. Evan said, perception is a trial of its own, and a smile grazed strategy. A news crawl on the wall TV chewed the verdict into easy bites. Maya said, they will swallow that until it becomes bone, and her hands steadied. Evan said, let me shield you from the noise, and the shield showed seams. Outside, sirens braided with rain like threads that would not hold. The bus stop hummed with wet tires and secrets that did not cue. Lena Park said, you're late, and her hoodie dripped a thin rebellion. Maya Hale said, I came anyway, and the street lamp cut her shadow in half. Lena said, he met her by the river twice, and unlocked a phone with a bruised thumb. Evan Cross said, where did this come from, arriving out of rain like an apology? Lena said, people throw away the best truths, and showed a file tree like a spine. A bus wheezed indifferent to confessions, and left exhaust that tasted like coins. Maya said, this is Jonah's laugh, and the night leaned to listen. Evan said, we document the metadata before anything else, and opened his notebook. Lena said, you can document me after you believe me, and turned away. Somewhere downstream, a train stitched steel to silence and dared them to follow. The security office breathed like a quiet machine and kept better secrets than people. Noah Briggs said, chain logs don't lie, and the printer replied with teeth. A wall of monitors split the courthouse into watchable squares. Maya Hale said, show me access after hours, and she stood too still. Noah, said policy, requires a request, and his finger hovered above approval. Evan Cross said, we can file at once, and his tone wore patience like a badge. A camera feed blinked to black, then back like doubt with timing. Maya said, someone walked Jonah through that door, and the air thinned. Noah said, doors, record footsteps in numbers, and the spreadsheet waited. Evan said, numbers tell a story when you line them up, and drew columns. The clock over the monitors clicked the room toward a truth that would invoice them all. Vivian Mercer's office reflected a city that mistook polish for virtue. Vivian Mercer, said schedule a clarification, and the skyline obeyed in glass. An art book lay open to a painting about control disguised as grace. Maya Hale said, you were with Jonah the night before, in a message that refused emojis. Vivian said, proximity is not guilt, and closed the book like a verdict. Evan Cross said, we will release a timeline, and diplomacy crept into his spine. Lena Park said, ask who paid for the car that night, and the room tilted. Vivian said, careful where you look, it becomes yours, and returned to the window. The city hummed like a sympathetic accomplice, and dimmed none of its lights. Maya said, truth will find a door, and started counting hinges. Somewhere an elevator chimed, and the floor decided who it would carry. The evidence lockers smelled like coal dust and old lies, and the barcode reader blinked a sleepy red. Maya Hale said, open it, and the click sounded smaller than her fear. Noah Briggs said, 2 signatures on intake, 1 on release, and the log waited like a trap. Evan Cross said, document every step, and his pen hovered like a witness. The drawer rolled out and met them empty, a mouth that had already eaten. Maya said. The flash drive was here, and memory tightened its grip. Noah said. Then someone with clearance touched it, and the room shrank a size. Evan said. We reported the chain within the hour, and the air lifted, then fell. Maya said. Vivian profits when proof dissolves, and the syllables carried heat. Noah said. Or someone framed the vanishing, and he did not look at anyone. A far radio muttered weather, promising rain that could not wash this clean. The stairwell kept secrets better than the offices, and each echo arrived wearing doubt. Maya Hale said, maybe I wanted the clip to carry everything, and sat on the cold step. Evan Cross said, you wanted it to be enough, and the words softened gravity. A fluorescent hummed like a trapped fly and flickered with poor timing. Maya said, what if I led us to nothing, and the railing felt like a boundary? Evan said, you led us to questions with teeth, and his voice wore steadiness. The door above them thumped as someone passed and their silence hid. Maya said, Jonah trusted the wrong room, and the stairwell tilted. Evan said, trust is a bridge you test while crossing, and his hand did not touch hers. Maya said, I keep counting exits and coming back here, and the breath she took was thin. The hums steadied, as if the light finally chose a side. The record's annex smelled like toner and careful erasures, and the clerk stamped time without looking. Evan Cross said, I need last month's visitor logs, and slid a form that already knew yes. Maya Hale said, Vivian leaves prints in courtesy and watched pages that practiced innocence. Evan said, I also need internal camera maintenance tickets, and his pen found sympathetic ink. The clerk sighed, then produced a stack that leaned toward confession. Maya said, half the cameras went dark the night Jonah met her, and the margin dared them. Evan said, we request the vendor call sheets, and the tone wrapped velvet around a blade. Clark said, confidential, and looked away first. Maya said, we will wait, and patience planted a flag. Evan said, I will make a copy request that cannot be refused. And the clerk finally nodded. The copier warmed like a small, useful storm. The thrift store wore the city's cast-offs like armor, and the bell at the door confessed to every arrival. Lena Park said, you never checked the donate bin, and kicked a crate toward the back. Maya Hale said, what did you find? And her voice kept the aisle narrow. Lena said, a charger that isn't sold here, and lifted a cable like a clue. Evan Cross said, brand matches the missing drive, and his relief arrived suspicious. Lena said, people hide things where they look poor, and her grin was sharpened. Maya said, then the vanishing was theater, and the idea breathed new air. Lena said, I tracked a receipt to a storage unit, and the bell rang again. Evan said, we proceed without touching anything, and his caution moved faster. Lena said, I already touched it, and laughed like a dare. The cashier watched them like a show worth a tip. The parking garage leaned into shadow, and every pillar kept a secret ledger. Noah Briggs said, you contacted me off record, and his voice had edges. Evan Cross said we need access to Unit C27, and the echo made it plural. Maya Hale said, the drive moved through charity, and the word stung. Noah said, you bring me rumor and a cable, and weighed both with his stare. Lena Park said, I bring the locker code, and the keypad waited to be believed. Noah said, if I help, I own the fallout, and the distance between them shortened. Evan said, then own the truth instead, and the pitch rang clean. Maya said, Jonah deserves a door that opens, and the concrete took her side. Noah keyed the code, and metal sighed like an old confession. The unit light warmed, and found boxes labeled in a careful hand. Somewhere above, a car started and chose not to descend. The storage unit smelled of mold and ink, as if secrets rotted while still writing themselves. Maya Hale said, boxes don't vanish like drives, and cut through tape with steady hands. Evan Cross said, every file here names a donor, and his eyes tracked paper like prey. Noah Briggs said, this foundation holds more than charity, and the fluorescent buzz agreed. Lena Park said, Look at the receipts stapled inside, and her hoodie sleeve brushed dust. Maya said, Vivian built a network on signatures that bleed, and lifted a folder with trembling calm. Evan said, these grants linked to Jonah's last night, and the words lit like flares. Noah said, if this leaks, careers collapse, and his voice carried both warning and regret. Lena said, truth doesn't ask permission, and snapped a photo with her cracked phone. The room thickened with paper that weighed more than steel. The letter finally tore open like a wound that waited years. Lena Park said, I found this in your pocket when you weren't looking, and her defiance carried fear. Maya Hale said, that was never yours, and her voice cracked. The paper whispered of payouts from Vivian Mercer's foundation. Evan Cross said, this is a settlement disguised as help, and his jaw clenched. Maya said, Jonah was listed as a recipient, and the world tilted. Lena said, you survived the fire, but they paid you to keep quiet, and her sketchbook dropped shut. Maya said, I never touched their money, and heat burned her cheeks. Evan said, but silence can be currency, and his kindness faltered. Maya said, Jonah deserved truth, not hush, and her pulse matched the rain outside. The letter's ink blurred as if refusing to be read again. The diner booth glowed with neon fatigue, and the sugar dispenser reflected betrayal. Evan Cross said, I funded my practice with her grants and stirred coffee gone cold. Maya Hale said, you hid it, and her words cut deeper than knives. Evan said, I thought I could redirect her reach, and his eyes begged forgiveness. Lena Park said, Vivian buys silence, not loyalty, and tapped the cracked phone screen. Evan said, without those grants, none of this would be standing, and the booths seemed to lean. Maya said, you let her thread into Jonah's case, and silence tasted metallic. Evan said, I tried to keep it clean, and the spoon rang against porcelain. Lena said, clean hands don't take her money, and her glare burned. Maya said, comfort carries a price I cannot pay again, and her breath fogged the glass. Vivian Mercer's townhouse smelled of polish and power, the air cleaner than truth. Vivian Mercer said, your anger is predictable, and her voice carried calm like a weapon. Maya Hale said, you bankrolled silence, and her fists curled. Vivian said, I offered survival, and her pearl earrings caught lamplight. Evan Cross said, you tied us all to your empire, and shame shadowed his tone. Vivian said, empires survive storms, people do not, and her gaze was unshaken. Lena Park said, Jonah was with you the night before, and her hoodie seemed too small. Vivian said, he sought me not the other way, and control curved every syllable. Maya said, you rewrote memory as debt, and the walls tightened. Vivian said, perception is reality, and the firelight flickered gold. The silence afterward weighed more than stone. The river bridge groaned under weight. It wasn't meant to carry. Maya Hale said, Jonah hummed here the night he vanished, and her breath made frost. Lena Park said, he left a sketch of this spot, and held paper soft with age. Evan Cross said, Vivian was the last one to see him, and his words blew colder than wind. Noah Briggs stepped from the shadows and said, not the last, and silence snapped. Maya said, you were there, and her pulse raced. Noah said, I let him through the gate, and his eyes carried regret. Lena said, you betrayed him, and her voice cut the dark. Noah said, I thought I was saving the greater good, and shame bent his shoulders. Maya said, you saved nothing, and the river hissed below. The truth finally rose like steam that refused to vanish. The courtroom filled again, but this time the silence had teeth. Maya Hale said, play the footage, and her voice cracked the stillness. Evan Cross said, objection anticipated, and steadied his breath like armor. Vivian Mercer sat poised, fingers folded, as if the room were already hers. Lena Park whispered, this is the moment, and slid the phone across the table. The screen lit Jonah's face, blurred but undeniable, standing beside Vivian's shadow. Noah Briggs shifted, his guilt etched sharper than the judge's gavel. Maya said, the truth walks into this room whether you let it or not, and her pulse beat against the walls. Vivian said, a grainy clip cannot convict legacy, and her words dripped contempt. The gallery leaned forward, a single living wave of breath. The judge raised a hand, and the gavel waited, craving another scar in wood. Behind closed chambers, the air was tighter than any cell. Maya Hale said, why did you help her? And her fists pressed against the table. Evan Cross said, because I thought I could control the current, and regret wove his words. Noah Briggs said, I opened the gate for Jonah, believing it was mercy, and his stare fell heavy. Lena Park said, mercy doesn't erase the dead, and her voice cracked sharp. Vivian Mercer, calm, said you all built your own cages, and her cane tapped marble like punctuation. Maya said, Jonah trusted us, and we failed him, and silence pressed harder. Evan said, we still hold the chance to end this, and his breath broke the stillness. Vivian said, endings are myths told by losers, and her smirk cut. Lena said, truth doesn't lose, and her cracked phone buzzed with proof. The room leaned toward fracture, and no one looked away. The revelation cut deepest when it came from the friend they trusted. Noah Briggs said, I reported Jonah's meeting to Vivian, and his voice cracked like old wood. Maya Hale said, you were the constant, and her betrayal burned louder than rage. Evan Cross said, you tipped the balance, and shame threaded his words. Noah said, I thought loyalty meant choosing order over chaos, and his hands shook. Lena Park said, you killed him with your silence, and her eyes stabbed. Vivian Mercer leaned back, savoring the fracture. Maya said, every exit I mapped, you closed, and her breath trembled. Noah said, I cannot undo the door I opened, and lowered his head. Evan said, but you can testify now, and his plea cracked the quiet. Maya said, truth betrayed is still truth, and her voice rang like steel. The room knew nothing would mend clean again. The courthouse corridor roared like an ocean of whispers as the betrayal spread. Reporters' cameras clicked, lightning without thunder. Maya Hale said, do not spin this, and shoved past microphones. Evan Cross said, we need a statement, and his tie tugged tight. Lena Park said, no more statements, only evidence, and raised her phone. Noah Briggs trailed, eyes hollow, the weight of betrayal heavier than the crowd. Vivian Mercer glided untouched, her calm smile feeding lenses. Maya said, she thrives on spectacle, and her steps quickened. Evan said, we can still anchor this, and his voice fought panic. Lena said, anchor already drowned, and her hoodie brushed against Maya's arm. A camera flash froze them, survivors etched in light. The hallway's echo promised the truth would bleed everywhere. The final confrontation broke under the gavel's echo. Maya Hale said, this is not just Jonah's trial, it is ours, and her words rose like flame. Evan Cross said, we stand with evidence, and his hand touched the file. Vivian Mercer said, evidence bends, and her smirk refused to die. Lena Park said, not this time, and her cracked phone screen glowed brighter than chandeliers. Noah Briggs said, I testify to the gate I opened, and his shoulders squared at last. Maya said, truth walks faster than lies, and her voice filled the chamber. Evan said, legacy cannot outlast exposure, and he steadied the case file. Vivian said, you cannot erase power, and her eyes narrowed. Lena said, power already erased Jonah, and her words drew silence. The judge's gavel fell, and the room exhaled with fracture and fire. The verdict echoed, but justice sounded hollow, its edges chipped by compromise. Maya Hale said, they called it closure, and her voice carried iron. Evan Cross said, at least it's on record, but his eyes betrayed the weight of concessions. Vivian Mercer stood unbowed, her smile sculpted from marble, a monument to power. Lena Park whispered, this isn't victory, it's a receipt, and her cracked phone dimmed in her palm. Noah Briggs said, I gave them the truth, though shame lingered like smoke on his jacket. The judge's gavel sat still, silent but bruised, scarred wood remembering its fall. Maya said, justice twisted itself into a mask, and her pulse tightened. Evan said, we made the ledger balance, but his hands trembled as if he signed a debt. Vivian said, history belongs to those who write it, and her cane tapped finality into the marble floor. The gallery exhaled uneasily, unsure whether to clap or flee. Rain followed them to the parking lot, dripping on proof and regrets alike. Maya Hale said, I kept Jonah's letter closed for years, and her words trembled with the storm. Evan Cross said, then open it now, and his breath fogged the glass of the car. Lena Park said, truth waited too long already, and pressed the letter into Maya's hands. Noah Briggs leaned against the wet hood, silent, guilt weighing more than rain. Maya unfolded the paper, the ink bleeding from old damp. Jonah Reed's handwriting curved soft, promising he would meet Vivian to confront her. Maya said he thought he was strong enough, and her eyes blurred with grief. Evan said he trusted too much, and his tie soaked dark with rain. Lena said, and they took him for it, her voice sharp as lightning. The storm broke harder, baptizing them all in unfinished justice. The rooftop became Lena's battleground, the skyline bleeding neon and storm clouds. Lena Park said, Jonah left me sketches, and her hoodie clung wet to her frame. Maya Hale said, why didn't you show us sooner, her tone balancing anger and ache. Lena said, because you wouldn't believe me until it was too late, and she held up a water-stained drawing. Evan Cross said, this connects his disappearance to Vivian's gala, and his voice caught in the wind. Noah Briggs said, I escorted them inside that night, and regret etched deeper. Maya said, you betrayed him twice, and her eyes burned fire through rain. Lena said, but now his truth belongs to us, and slammed the sketchbook closed. Evan said, we'll use it, though his voice felt paper-thin. Maya said, we will honor it, and the storm drowned the city in approval. The interrogation room felt smaller than truth itself, its walls painted with distrust. Noah Briggs sat across the table, hands clasped like broken chains. Maya Hale said, you chose them over him, and her voice carved each word. Noah said, I thought survival meant sacrifice. His gaze anchored to the floor. Evan Cross said, then testify again, this time with no omissions, and the tape recorder blinked red. Lena Park leaned against the wall, her hoodie pulled tight, eyes burning. Noah said, I'll name Vivian. I'll name the foundation, his voice cracking. Maya said, then say Jonah's name first, and her breath caught fire. Noah whispered, Jonah Reed, and silence thickened like cement. Lena said, now it counts, and the storm outside rattled the glass. Evan said, we will deliver this, and clicked the recorder off. The truth was trapped, but it had a voice again. Vivian Mercer's empire cracked not in fire, but in paper. Court filings stacked high, each one naming her foundation. Maya Hale said, truth doesn't die in ink, and her hand trembled over signatures. Evan Cross said, we will bury her in facts, and his voice found steel. Lena Park said, Jonah sketched this moment, and her cracked phone lit the drawing. Noah Briggs said, this is the only testimony I can give back, his voice raw. Vivian Mercer entered, eyes sharp as glass, cane striking marble with venom. Vivian said, you think this ends me, and her smirk dared gravity. Maya said, it already has, and pushed the file across. Evan said, legacy cannot erase ledger, and his hand pressed the record down. Vivian's smirk fractured, and silence held its breath. Justice arrived, imperfect, but sharp enough to wound. The city exhaled after the trial, but the silence carried fractures deeper than sound. Maya Hale said, justice came wearing a mask, and her footsteps echoed through the empty courthouse steps. Evan Cross said, we made history tonight, yet his voice held the quiver of debts unpaid. Lena Park said, history doesn't comfort ghosts, and her hoodie clung heavy with rain. Noah Briggs trailed behind, each step dragging the weight of betrayal. Vivian Mercer vanished into black cars, her smirk lingering like smoke in mirrors. Maya said, Jonah should have walked these steps with us, and the night still. Evan said, his name is carved in the record, though his eyes refused to meet hers. Lena whispered, names fade unless you keep saying them, and the words felt like a vow. The courthouse clock struck, its bell heavy sealing truth into memory. The street lights hummed, flickering, as if unsure who won. The morning after smelled of wet pavement and bitter coffee, the city pretending it hadn't witnessed collapse. Maya Hale sat at a diner window and said, he'd have hated the silence, tracing condensation with her finger. Evan Cross slid a file across the table and said, his sketchbook will be archived, his voice deliberate. Lena Park slammed her palm and said, Jonah isn't a file, her hoodie sleeves dripping onto formica. The waitress refilled mugs without asking, her eyes carrying curiosity she dared not voice. Noah Briggs leaned against the counter, badge tucked away, whispering, I will testify again, though no one asked him. Maya said, we all carry his shadow differently, her words soft but firm. Evan said, and yet we carry him, looking toward Lena with apology. Lena whispered, I carry him loud, her cracked phone buzzing once more. Outside, buses hissed, carrying strangers who knew nothing of Jonah Reed. The alley smelled of rust and rain, carrying Jonah's ghost in echoes of humming. Maya Hale said, he practiced music here, her hand brushing graffiti. Lena Park said, he left pieces of himself in walls, lifting a torn page from a crack. Evan Cross crouched to read the faded ink, whispering, he wrote of fire and betrayal, his tone broken. Noah Briggs stood back, unable to step closer, muttering, I guarded this alley once, shame in every syllable. Maya said, you guarded the wrong door, her voice slicing the damp. Lena said, but he wanted to be remembered, and tucked the page into her hoodie pocket. Evan said, memory is fragile, but we can frame it, his words carrying hope. Maya said, or we can live it, her voice stronger. The rain stopped suddenly, as if the city held its breath with them. The attic smelled of dust and forgotten music, boxes stacked like tombstones. Maya Hale said, he wrote songs no one heard, her voice soft as she lifted a guitar case. Evan Cross opened a notebook and said, lyrics about fire, silence and forgiveness, his hands careful. Lena Park said, he hummed them to me once, her hoodie sleeve brushing the strings. Noah Briggs leaned in doorway and whispered, I heard him that night, his voice cracking. Maya said, you silenced the wrong sound, her eyes sharp. Evan said, these lyrics will outlive us, his tone resolved. Lena said, then let them speak, and struck a chord that trembled dust. The guitar hummed, carrying Jonah's voice into walls once deaf. Maya said, he was more than evidence, and her tears fell steady. Outside, the wind lifted, as if carrying Jonah's song farther than grief could follow. The river whispered under moonlight, carrying secrets too heavy for silence. Maya Hale said, we brought him back here, her voice trembling but steady. Evan Cross said, his name belongs to water and memory, eyes fixed on the current. Lena Park said, and to us, her hoodie sleeve wiping away tears as she tossed the sketch into the river. Noah Briggs said, forgive me, Jonah, and his shoulders bent until he almost broke. Maya said, forgiveness is not ours to give, her eyes reflecting the current. Evan said, but memory is ours to protect, and placed the letter beside the sketch. Lena whispered, he hums when the river moves, and her cracked phone buzzed once, unanswered. The moon cast silver over the water, painting them as survivors, not victors. The night closed, leaving only one line echoing. The crime no one saw coming never really ended.